All Blacks by 4 points, folks. They are the favourites heading into this one with the bookmakers anyway. Ranked 3 in the world, heading to Twickenham, the home of rugby, to take on ranked 5 England. Are they indeed the favourites in your book? We'll go through the squads, some recent history, the stats, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on what the predictions say. 3-1 is the recent history. If we're looking back at the last 5, I can count to 5, and there is a draw in the mix. That's why it's kind of 3-1 to the ABs, with the draw on the side. The only win the English have had over the All Blacks in their last 5 matches was that 2019 Rugby World Cup match. But all of the results have tended to be pretty close. We got a couple of 16-15 results, including the one from Dunedin this year. You got a 19-7, you got a 25-all draw, and you got a 24-17. So average score for these teams in recent years tends to be very close. 18 points each side tends to be the average across the last 5 games. It feels like this weekend's game should also be something similar. I can't see a blowout on the cards. I hope it goes down to the kind of edge of your seat stuff, especially given the kickoff time for those of us in New Zealand is not the best, so it would be pleasing to see a result which has got you kind of blood pumping, edge of your seat action come the 80th minute. England named their squad first a couple of days ago. Major talking points were largely the 6-2 split, with a kind of specialist 9 and 10 on the bench, so not that kind of versatility player on the bench role anyway, although a bunch of guys in the back line in the starting 15 who are able to cover multiple positions. Particularly excited to see how Ben Earl is going to go. He was an absolute workhorse down here in New Zealand. I think he got 22 carries in each of the 2 games, Dunedin and Eden Park. So very much a busy man. Emmanuel Faye-Waboso is also named on the right wing. He has scored 5 tries in 5 games in the Premiership this season, so he seems to be coming into this one with a bit of form. And I'm also keen to see how Slade goes at 13. Henry Slade with his fitness. He's only played less than an hour of Premiership rugby this season. Is he going to last the full 80? Because that is the one area that if they do get an injury, could be a bit of an interesting one. I guess Freeman can slot into the midfield if necessary, and they can shuffle the back line, but just from my point of view down here in NZ, that's the one area that I would be particularly concerned if England were to get an early injury. For the All Blacks, I mean, seeing Savia go up against the likes of Ben Earl is going to be fascinating, because if you look back at that England-New Zealand series, Ben Earl was getting through a lot more work than Savia. I think Savia only carried about half the amount of times that Ben Earl did. However, following that, as we got into the Rugby Championship, Savia went back into that mould that we're more familiar seeing as the top ball carrier for the ABs and for the entire Rugby Championship proper. So, yeah, which guy gets their hands on the ball more will be a fascinating one to watch. Also, New Zealand have got their own kind of high-flying, scoring outside backs. Caleb Clark was the top try scorer in the Rugby Championship with 6. So him up against Faye-Waboso should certainly be one to watch, I think. Now for some stats and strategy, how do England go with their kicking game? They've picked Spencer at 9. He's been doing a fair bit of kicking at club level thus far this season. One would expect England, especially under Steve Borthwick, who's got a reputation for playing a bit of kind of conservative style kicking rugby, whether that's 100% fair or not. I'm not totally sure it fits, because the side does have some nice attacking numbers, but they do kick a lot. They kick around 30 times a game, which is more than the All Blacks. The All Blacks average around 25, although the All Blacks in their recent series against England, as I still think they were kind of finding their feet a little bit under Razor, they actually out-kicked England in terms of just pure number of kicks from hand. The sides do tend to kick a little bit differently, though. England, a side that prefer to kick a bit more off 9. New Zealand prefer to kick a bit more off 10. Whether England decide to put up some high balls, contestable box kicks, do they go long? I mean, if you kick into Will Jordan, if you kick into Caleb Clark, these guys are pretty good in the air and not afraid to run it back at you. But if they can get some contestable balls going, New Zealand have been vulnerable there in the past. If they're able to win those 50-50s, they could put themselves in a pretty good territorial position. And the line-out. The line-out is going to be a fascinating one because, as I mentioned, as New Zealand was still finding their feet early on under Razor, England dominated line-out time. Maro Itoje was causing havoc in the New Zealand line-out. Over here in the July tests, the line-out percentage for the All Blacks was in the 70s. 75% and I think 77%. But as the Rugby Championship got underway, New Zealand actually finished that competition with the highest line-out completion rate at not far away from 90%, 89%. So it did get better, and Razor did mention in the press conference that back when they played England in July, they were still trying to learn their calls, let alone, put teams to the sword. So it may be that he's correct and that the side has come a long way since that time. To be fair, though, England's line-out is also pretty immaculate. They averaged 90% throughout the year 2024. Now, a lot's been made of New Zealand's final quarter, because in the final 20 minutes of the Rugby Championship, only one game did the All Blacks manage to score any points. That was the final game against the Australians, where we managed to score 7 points. All the other 5 games, we didn't manage to score any. But interestingly, prior to that Rugby Championship series, the final 20 was a pretty good period for the All Blacks. Against England, they didn't concede any points in the final 20. So which final 20-minute period side shows up for the All Blacks' point of view will be one to watch. And also, England aren't a particularly prolific side in the final 20. As I said, they didn't manage to score any points down here in New Zealand in their final 20 minutes. It's their third quarter that tends to be their main, across the 2024 year anyway, their main strike quarter. That's when they score the most points, especially just after half-time. Now, for England, a little bit concerningly, in the 2024 year, their 2 worst games in terms of their line being broken, like clean breaks conceded, their 2 worst games have been against New Zealand, game number 1, and against New Zealand, game number 2. More so than any of the other Six Nations games and whatnot. So they have had that kind of catastrophic line break moment, although pleasingly for them, they still didn't concede a whole heap of tries against the ABs down here, despite those kind of catastrophic line breaks, because many times clean breaks and tries go hand in hand. And for New Zealand, their worst game in terms of run meters per carry, like they got a few clean breaks, but in terms of just the regular ball carries, trucking it up over the advantage line, game 1 against England in Dunedin, averaging 2.2 meters a carry, which for the All Blacks is remarkably low. That was even lower than the game where we lost to Argentina in Wellington a few weeks later. It's averaged a bit more since then. We're closer to 4 meters a carry, which is that kind of magic number which shows you are getting the ball forward. But we have seen this very year England able to keep some pretty effective All Blacks ball carriers looking less sharp than usual. Predictions-wise, the All Blacks are favourites, like I mentioned at the start. It is 4 points with the bookies and 5 points with the rugby forecast algorithm. So not really a strong prediction either way. It is predicted to, as the recent games have panned out, to be a close one. If you are looking to potentially have a flutter on the game, I invite you to check out Rugby Forecast, who I mentioned in many of my videos. They have now a betting analysis tool which essentially runs their Rugby Forecast algorithms like machine learning predictions and compares it to all the various odds the different bookies are offering, because the bookies kind of set different odds in some cases, and occasionally you can find the bookies who have slightly mispriced their odds, which might leave you a little window for potentially a more valuable bet than normal. So kind of, I don't want to say lower risk, but a kind of better option for return on bet, basically. So you're always uphill against the bookies, but if you want to look for that bit of value, Rugby Forecast has a tool which can help you for that. I'll put a link down in the description. If you use the code 2CentsRugby, you can get 20% off your first 3 months. And I think they offer the first month 3 anyway. So you can go down, have a wee play with it. If you find any value there, use it. It is certainly a really useful tool. It is on at Twickenham this weekend, or Allianz Stadium, as it has been kind of rebranded. Angus Gardner from Australia is the ref. It is a 3:10 local kickoff, which is 4:10 in the morning for those of us in New Zealand, so not ideal timing, but I'll be getting up to watch it live. You guys let us know your thoughts on this one. Do you also have New Zealand as favourites? It would not shock me to see either of these sides win, because I think they're both good sides. Rank 5, rank 3, there shouldn't be that much between them. If I'm being an optimistic Kiwi, I would say I hope New Zealand has come along a wee way since June, July, kind of when we faced England. and England hasn't had any international rugby since then, so maybe that gives a slight advantage to the All Blacks. But at Twickenham, who knows? You guys let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.